Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I have been working on that Jeep Buggy, but progress has been real slow on it. So I've decided to push it aside for now and start working on something new. As I'm sure you've already noticed, here it is sitting behind me. So I've mentioned a few times that I got out of RC about 10 years ago or so. One of the very last trucks I owned was a custom exo cage Cherokee based around the Proline Cherokee body that they don't make anymore. And it was built for me by one of my buddies. On Instagram he goes as Kona Joe. His work is incredible. So I talked to him about it, and together we kind of designed this chassis, and then he built it for me. And unfortunately that I decided I was kind of done with the hobby, and so I sold everything, including that truck. About a month ago, I started thinking back on this truck and started wishing that I still had it. The person I sold it to was one of my friends, and fortunately he still had it. I reached out to him, we worked out a deal, and he sent it out to me. And I am so stoked to have it again. So, let's get into it. So here it is. As you can see, it's the Proline Cherokee Lexan body with this tube chassis. One of my main requirements when building this tube chassis was that it had to stay as close to the contours of the body as possible. I hate it when you see an exo cage and it looks like a jungle gym hanging off of the truck because there's just so much space between the body and the tube work. And so Kona Joe did a phenomenal job on this. Truly, his work is outstanding. Another one of the requirements was that the truck be easy to work on, and obviously with an exo cage it can be really hard to get tools in there and everything. So Kona Joe came up with this idea to have the whole exo cage be removable so you can get into the chassis really easily. The way he did it was to braze on these little mounting tabs that then mount to corresponding holes in the chassis. So with a couple of screws, you can get the whole exterior off and you're left with just the chassis. So this has pretty much remained unchanged since 2010, 2011. I honestly don't remember. My friend who I sold it to did make a few changes. So he added this updated transfer case and gearbox. It used to be just the axial SCX-10, the original one. The transmission was mounted right here in the middle, and so center of gravity on this thing was not great. And so he updated it to move the motor further forward with this transfer case. The problem is now these angles, driveline angles, are pretty severe. And so he told me you have to be really careful because the drive shafts really like to break. So one thing I'll eventually be changing is this whole gearbox setup. The other thing that I think is a bit of a problem is these angles of the suspension links. Again, pretty severe. And part of the problem is this bottom section of the chassis doesn't drop down very far. So another thing I'm contemplating of doing is just chopping this whole bottom section off and dropping it down maybe ½ an inch or so, just so that these suspension links are a bit more level. As you can tell, it is still running the original SCX-10 axles. These are the original ones. These are my old axles from 10, 11, 12 years ago. It has a 3-link in the front, 4-link in the rear. So this is a custom link mount / panhard bar mount. These will get updated to the new SCX-10-2 axles. The rear here is pretty simple, typical 4-link mount, again, custom link mount. This spare tire mount is just a piece of metal on the back that kind of clamps between 2 bars. So I removed the spare tire mount. It's honestly just this little piece of aluminum that slides between the bars and then uses the pressure from the tire when you screw it down to clamp against that bar. This will probably be something I braze on just so it's a little bit more permanent. But this gives you a better idea of the rear. It's literally just shock tower and some bracing, and that's it. These shocks will be updated to more scale versions. I think these are old maybe Traxxas, the aluminum shocks. I honestly don't know if they've been rebuilt since I got rid of it 10 years ago. Moving back to the center of the chassis, you can kind of get a better idea of what's going on here. This is the battery tray. I think this is just a piece of styrene that's been molded and glued to these little panels here. It's working, but this may get updated for kind of a more permanent solution. And then for running gear, we got an old Spectrum SR300 receiver, a Tekken FXR speed control, and then this motor, it looks like maybe a Phantom motor. I'm not really sure the make or how many turns it is. This is not original. I think I honestly used to have like an old 55 turn lathe motor in this thing. And then my buddy put in this one and he couldn't remember how many turns it was. So he told me he'd been driving it on a 2200 3S LiPo, so that's what I got myself. Again, I'm totally new to all this. Back when I was doing this, we were using the Nikit batteries. You know, you get 20 minutes runtime out of them. So obviously I'm really excited to have this thing back in my possession. I do have a little bit planned for it, just to bring it kind of up to date, because it is pretty outdated, as you can tell. This thing is not a competition rig by any means, but that's not really what I'm into. I was never into the competing, I was never into that scene. I was very much more interested in trail rigs, just kind of tooling around, having fun out in the woods, and that's definitely where this kind of fits nicely. So as far as updates go, it's going to be pretty minimal. New axles, new transmission. My buddy did do a partial interior, and I think I just want to kind of complete what he started and add in a back seat and fuel cell, just little things like that, just to make it look a little bit better. I also want to add boat sides to the rocker panels, full headlights, a light bar, and then in the rear, I'm trying to decide if I want to cut out the rear hatch and have the spare tire kind of sticking out a little bit. I found a picture of a rig online that I really like, so I'll add it in here just so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm thinking. Because this is a Lexan body, I feel like I'm kind of limited with what I can do. Obviously hard bodies have a lot more detail to them. This one, not so much. So this is certainly not going to be as scale as, you know, some of the other incredible rigs you see out there. Not that I could even do that level of work. But this is just going to be something kind of in the middle where it's a little bit more scale. It's not going to win any competitions or anything like that. So yeah, the next few videos are just going to be videos of this thing driving around. It's been a long time since I've made videos of actually driving trucks. But I have some ideas in mind of how to get some cool angles and stuff like that. So look forward to that. As always guys, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment,